Hey everyone, welcome back. This is episode 4 of CNY Conversations. I am Jason Klink, your host. Today I have a guest, so you don't have to listen to me rant and roll for 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is. But today I'm here with Nicole Danielle. Nicole and I struck up a friendship through our networking group on Facebook, which is CNY Business Persons and Entrepreneurs. Check it out. It's a Facebook networking group, and she joined the group along with her brother, John Page. I don't know if some of you might know John. He's the owner of Three Lives Downtown and Pork and Knife. But Danielle is a creative entrepreneur and dream embodiment guide. She empowers women and entrepreneurs to become their dreams realized through her workshops, her coaching, and her small business consulting. And I wanted to have Nicole on today to talk about, growing and starting and scaling a local business based on some of her previous experience. So Nicole, thank you for jumping on the podcast for this very early 4th episode.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This is awesome.
Absolutely. So, Nicole has a very interesting story, and that's one of the reasons one of many reasons why I like talking to her, because she went from being a local gal here in Central New York to going overseas to reinventing herself, learning new skill set multiple times, learning new skill sets, coming back to the States and putting them into play. So Nicole, why don't you talk a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Oh my gosh. How long is this podcast?
As long as it needs to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. So no pressure on the time limit.
That's right.
I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. I guess like the best way to start is that for like my background, it's always kind of been, I've always played kind of very in the moment, and then like kind of looked at my immediate needs and like what I wanted to accomplish in my life, and then found like a solution in the moment, and then started to branch off of that as like new information came to me. So for example, how I ended up kind of coming to be traveling around and eventually got overseas was that I initially started in Syracuse. I had gone away to college, school down in New York, got my undergrad, and then I came back home and I was here for a couple of years, and I was just kind of like frustrated, and just at that point, like in your mid-20s, where it's like you thought things were going to go one way, and then you find yourself back home and living the life that you had hoped when you were 18 that you wouldn't be living. So it's just that point of frustration. And there was a lot of other things going on with me too at that time, like personal, starting to go inward and being like, well, why am I here? And ask those questions of like, what haven't I done yet? Like, why am I in this spot? What do I need to do to kind of get to where my dreams are? And when you start to ask those questions, it stirs up a lot. When you start to ask like,
oh yeah,
what can I do? I think just by like putting it out there, it just moves for the universe or your internal world or like your psyche just to start like in the background turning as you go through life.
Yep.
So I was in that point of like just kind of frustrated, and I started to ask these questions of myself. And when I did that, like things started to open up and to change. And during that time, I just had this really strong desire just to travel. And so my focus at the beginning was just to make enough money so that I could travel. So at the time I was working at a restaurant. I decided to get a second job at another restaurant. And the second restaurant that I started working at was brand new. They were just opening. So I was on like the starting team. And within like a couple of weeks, I realized if I could focus all of my energy on this one restaurant instead of splitting my time because of where they were, I could start to like make a better spot for myself. It was downtown. It was downtown Syracuse. It was like near, all the municipal offices and, all that stuff.
Oh.
So I was like, there's money to be made here. We're doing lunch, we're doing dinner. It was just a better opportunity. So I pivoted and I went over to this new restaurant to invest more of my time for a better payoff. And when I did that, I think I was there for full time for maybe like a week. And then all of a sudden, one of the co-owners dropped out, who was also the chef.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was terrified because I was like, I just left my one job for this. And that job I had been with for like 3 years.
Right.
And I came here because it seemed like a better opportunity. But now, like, the lead member who is keeping this thing like going has just dropped out. Like, what am I going to do? And I just sat down and had a conversation with the remaining owner. And I was like, I need this job. Like, I need this to work. I can't go back to where I was. It was an unhealthy environment that I need to get myself out of.
Right.
And 2, like, I had these dreams, these goals. Like, I wanted to save up money so that I could travel. But I also felt very, very connected to this space and to what they were doing. This restaurant, it was called Parisa's. It's now 317 Montgomery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when they opened Parisa's, it was actually a dedication for the owner's daughter who had passed away like 2 years prior. And so hearing their story, meeting the family, meeting the friends, it was just like, it was more than a job. It was more than just an extra income. There was real purpose, there was passion, there was motivation there. And that was really why I wanted to be there. So I had this conversation with the remaining owner, who was the father of Parisa. And he was like, okay, well, you're in charge now. Just what would you do if this was your place? How would you run it? And I was like,
wow.
I was 25 at the time. And I guess in the moment, it was like, you don't really think about what you're going through. You just do it because it's kind of like that survival mode kicks in. So I just wanted to get this restaurant going. I wanted to like have this place going because I was already seeing the changes that were happening, you know, how it was like uplifting the family, like Parisa's family, her siblings, her friends could come in and just kind of like reminisce about her. And it felt like for the first time in my life, I actually had a purpose. Like I woke up, it was a lot of work. We had a very small team. I think we started off with like 16 people, but after the chef left, that like cut in half. Wow. And then as we continued, it got smaller and smaller and smaller until I think we were like 4 months into operation, and we had a team of like 3 core people, well, 4, including the owner, and then like a couple of other alternatives. One of which actually was my brother, who I brought on, and that's how he actually got his start in the restaurant industry, which is really, yeah. Okay. Isn't that fun? I love that. Yeah. And now I like see like all that he's like doing and creating, and I'm like, I had a hand in that.
You could take a little bit of credit for that.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit. But yeah, so it's just kind of like, that's how it started for me. It's like I had one immediate need, but then I saw like opportunities, and more than just seeing opportunities, I followed my heart and what felt aligned. So working with this owner, working with his family, working with the people that I worked there, it just felt really like bigger than me. And that's like one of the focuses of a lot of my work, where I only want to work on projects that feel that aligned, that feel like it's something beyond what we're actually doing. So long story short, kind of, in that time, I was working at Parisa's, and then it got to a place where it just felt like, I guess they were like at a spot where there was really nothing more that I could do. To get to that next level, the owner needed to bring in somebody that was more skilled. like a chef
Oh, okay.
who could
Yep.
really own that place and run it. I was doing, like I created the schedule. I was like managing the floor. I was kind of figuring out the kinks of just getting it going,
Yeah.
figuring out the general layout and blueprint for how this operation was to run. And then at that point, like once I kind of got that down, which at the time I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's just what it was. It got to this point where it was like, okay, now you need to bring in somebody who's more skilled at a higher level who can bring this up. So at that time, that's when we ended up parting ways. And then during that, there was a lot of like internal work that I was going through. And those questions that I had started asking were now starting to come more alive in me about
Yep.
like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, how do I get to be where I want to be? All these dreams that I had when I was a young person of like living around the world and traveling, they started to really come to a head. And I just found myself with an opportunity. Once I left Parisas, I didn't have anything tying me down, like holding me in Syracuse.
Right.
As one of my girlfriends really kindly put it, she's like, you have nothing. She's like, you don't have a job, you don't have a house, you don't have a boyfriend, like you're
Yeah.
completely alone. And I was like, well, thanks.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know. It was like, it was a lot, but it was actually really good. Sometimes it's like you need people to just be, and she wasn't being mean or anything. She was
Sure.
just,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, she was just being honest. She's like, you could be like me, mid 40s with a mortgage, a job that you depend on, a live-in boyfriend, and not have this opportunity right now to do whatever you want. So she
Right.
really kind of gave me that reality check. And that's when I just decided, I was like, I'm not going to wait on a job or whatever to have. Like my biggest thing with not traveling was this fear of not having enough money
Okay.
and not, and like, yeah. So after that conversation with her, I was like, she's right. Like, this is my time. Like, I may not have the money that I thought I needed to go, but I can find a way to do it. And so I ended up the way that I found to come up with the money, because at the time I wasn't working anymore. I sold my car, and then I went through like all of my belongings from like birth to however old I was, like 27, and just kind of like sorted through things. It was like this deep purge of like
Okay.
everything in my life. And because I had, previously lived on my own when I was down in the city, I had like a whole bunch of like apartment furniture that I was holding on to because at the time I'd moved back and I was living with my parents. So I had all this stuff that was like nice and was just sitting there. I wasn't going to be using it for at least the next 6 months. So I might as well like get rid of it, was my thinking. So that's
Right.
what I did. I like had this massive garage sale, sold everything that I could, and came up with, a nice chunk of change to bring me overseas. And then I ended up traveling over there, and I just really depended on people over there to kind of guide me and kind of show me like where to go, what to do, how to get by in this city. So I ended up moving to London. I traveled there for a summer, and it's that summer, it was like 3 months, and it is the foundation of all of my personal and spiritual work that I do with women and others. Those 3 months were just, it's so hard to really put it into words. Although I do want to write a book about it one day. So that's like,
And you should. And
yeah,
you absolutely should.
thank you. Yeah, I feel like one of the reasons that happened was so that I could share that story, to share my whole experience. There's so much, I can't dive into it right now, but there was just, the overall lesson was like learning to trust and learning to heal. Because at that time I was going through a lot of awakenings and understanding why I had been so stuck, why I hadn't been able to move forward with my dreams, and going through that process of uncovering these certain truths that we hide from ourselves sometimes can be very painful. So that's what I was going through when I was overseas. And in that time, going through all of this emotional pain, and then being able to rely on others, like strangers that I didn't even know, and their
Right.
kindness to support me and to kind of like encourage me. They didn't know me. They knew that I was clearly going through something. But the friends that I made over there, like we just had a great time, and we were all just about understanding that there's some reason that we all left our countries and moved to this foreign city. Like we're all going through something. And
Right.
so in that we were in the same boat and able to really support each other and to start guiding each other through our own journeys. But yeah, while I was over there, I just fell in love with London. And then I ended up, I came back to the States after that summer. And I just felt like when I came back, I told everybody, like my friends and my mom, that it's like, I never really came back. Like I was here, my body was here,
Right.
but my heart and my spirit was still overseas. And I needed to go and find out what that was. I needed to go and like connect with her. So some time went by. I think it was like a few months went by. I traveled back there just to like make sure like what I was feeling was really true. It was. And then I ended up moving over there like within a year, I think it was. And I went back to school. I got my master's. And then I started a business while I was over there. So I had my own pie company that I started, partly as a way just to remain over there. But there was also a lot tied into that from my experience at Paris's and realizing like I want to do something in this space.
Right.
Working with others and the food industry and all of that. So I did that. And then I ended up being in London for like 5 years, living over there. And then at the end of 2017, my visa was revoked, which was really, really difficult. I ended up being at a point in my business where I just realized it wasn't getting me to where I wanted it to go. So my whole intention with my pie company was to work with young people coming out of foster care, helping them to transition into employment.
Yep.
And so that was the focus. But what we had created in the meantime to get to having a cafe space was a pie company. And like a year and a half in, it was like, I'm not getting to really where I want to be. And when you're on this international visa, there's all these different time frames, restrictions, like certain things that you have to meet. So we were on a time crunch. We also had like a financial threshold that we had to make, and things just weren't getting there. And the more I saw it, the more it was becoming more about just making pies and selling a product versus what I wanted it to be, which was having a service that worked with others. So it was a really hard choice because I knew like if I stepped down from my business that I ran the risk of forfeiting my visa. But I ended up doing that. I ended up stepping down, and I got a nice letter in the mail from the government saying you have 60 days to vacate the country.
Thank you, but get out.
Yeah, basically. Oh my gosh. It was a really challenging time because they left me in limbo for, I think, like 4 months. From the time I submitted, I had to like write to them and let them know, like, I left my business and this is, what's going on. And then they had to tell me, like, they had the choice, like, you can either stay and, fill out the rest of your time, or we're going to have you leave. And I sat for 4 months waiting to hear back from them, which was it was painful.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And then I finally got the letter in the mail and they're like, you have 60 days to get out. And I was like, are you kidding? After 5 years here, 60 days to just kind of like pack up your life and just go someplace. So that was really difficult. And there was a lot of other stuff going on at that time when all of this was happening. And I ended up coming back to the States, and I moved in with my parents for a little bit. Then I moved down to DC. I lived with my brother. I helped him and his wife. My nephew had just been born, so I was a nanny there for a little while. But after that, I don't want to say I completely lost my way, but it was just one of those moments again where it's like you think things are going to go one way,
Yep.
and they end up going in a completely new direction.
Yeah.
And so I found like during that time, I've always struggled with like grounding myself in that chaos. Like, how do you stay firm in like what you're doing when it seems like your whole world is just spinning outside of you? And it's really difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to
Yeah.
unpack some of that a little bit. So you're,
I know that's a
you know,
lot.
you and it it's funny how true this rings, because I even just did one of my daily videos today about getting out of your box.
Mm,
Don't be put in a box that maybe society or a generational box that you get put in, and being able to have, especially when you're early to mid 20s, of going out, trying new things, and going on an adventure and tasting all the world that has to offer, and all of that. And you went from your time at Parisas.
mm-hmm.
Do you think that that was more of obviously it was a stepping stone for you. Obviously it was um, kind of a means to spread your butterfly wings and go try out the world.
Yeah.
But do you think the little bit of success that you had there was it? Did you have the freedom to be creative, or were you hampered being a local business, a local family owned business? Did you have to follow the constraints or the structure or organization that family owned business had put together?
No, I don't think I had to. I think at the time, me just being so green, we'll say, I don't even want to say
Yeah.
young, just green in life in general. Um, and where I was operating internally back then was from a very fear-based way of living, and
Mm-hmm.
like kind of along those lines of like, well, things have to be done a certain way. So it wasn't even like the owner or like, how the family was putting anything on. It was me who was like more restrained and being like, well, it has to be this way. And that is one thing where the owner and I would butt heads sometimes, because I was like, well, it should be this way. Like, this is the standard. And like, I had just come from a corporate franchised restaurant. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I knew certain standards. And he was actually the one who helped me. The owner, Payman, was the one who actually helped me to kind of open myself and to realize like things don't always have to fall into the box. Like, you're
Right.
creating your life. So I
Mm-hmm.
think basically, to get back to your question, there was room for creativity. And it's something that he definitely would have been like, go for it. But it was more on me and where I was. I was stuck in that box back then of,
Right.
being like, well, this is how we operate. This is how the world works. This is, what we're supposed to do. But we did do some things. Like we got creative in the way that like with making different connections and collaborations. So we worked with the Historical Association, Onondaga Historical Association, which is actually something that the owner helped to like get going. But partnering with them, I did a Make-A-Wish fundraiser because Parisa had been a part of Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Okay.
And Halloween was her favorite thing. So that was actually one of my favorite activities is we did a Halloween Make-A-Wish fundraiser. And yeah, I think I was there. I ended up being there for just under a year. So I wish, like, now I'm like, oh, there's so many more things I could have done. But at the time, it was just like, it was more like that survival mentality was just in full gear. So it was like, just show up every day and work, 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 work. Versus now, it's a little
Yeah.
bit more different.
And I think what you're showing is how life has its seasons. You go through winter, come out of it spring, and now you can harvest your crops as you go in
Yeah.
summer into fall, and that whole analogy. But I think it really shows there, because you went from not knowing what to do to diving headfirst into Parisas and in that local business, and then getting to a point where you grew everything yourself in that business to the point where it had to go in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going into that winter season again, where you had to go over to London and
Yeah.
reinvent yourself and figure out what your motivations were. and creating that niche, your own little life there
Yeah.
until the government said, sorry, you left your business, now you got to go.
Yeah.
But and then so you come back to the States, you're kind of floating, you help out your brother and your sister-in-law, and now you ended up coming back to Syracuse, right?
Yeah. So when I was in DC, my whole intention with going down to like DC with my brother and sister-in-law was that it was a city and like a new environment. I really didn't want to, no offense, I didn't want to come back to Syracuse. But I feel like a lot of people go through that where it's like, you just don't want to like come back because it's like you had these dreams. You thought things would go differently. And when you come back, sometimes it feels like you failed.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what it felt like. It wasn't sometimes, it's like, it felt like a failure for me. So I didn't want to come back to Syracuse. So that's why I went to DC. And when I was down there, I think I was there for like 2 weeks. And I realized like it was just going to be too much, like where I was in my life at that time, trying to process everything that was going on. It was just going to be too much for me to try on my own to really start fresh in a new city and get enough ground under my feet. So I made a commitment to my brother to like, be with them for 3 months while they got sorted with the new baby and trying to figure out how their schedules were going to work. And then in that time, I had actually talked to a girlfriend back in Syracuse who worked at Lemongrass.
Okay.
And I had actually seen her at a Christmas party and we had a conversation. And this is so funny. This is why I'm very careful now of like what I say sometimes. Because I had seen my friend at this Christmas party and she's like, oh, so what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I was filling her in. I was like, oh yeah, I'm down in DC, yada, yada, yada. And she's like, it stinks because we have a new position coming up and I feel like you would be perfect for it. It'd be like supporting the owner of Lemongrass. He's getting ready to open a new restaurant and he needs somebody like to do what she does, which basically she was his right-hand woman.
Person.
Yeah. Person. We need to be politically correct now.
For sure.
So she's like, but you would be basically, we're looking for somebody to help us with this new establishment, to manage it, to run everything, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. But yeah, I'm going to DC. And then I said to her, just as a joke, I was like, how funny would it be if I got to DC and I was like, meh, not really for me. And I came back to Syracuse and we laughed about it. And then like a month later, I called her up and I was like, hey, Ploy, so have you guys found anybody yet? Because I'm thinking about coming back to Syracuse. And it turned out they hadn't even started looking. So I came back to Syracuse to interview with the owner of Lemongrass, and he hired me to be I was actually hired to be the manager / maitre d' of Citronelle.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I came back to Syracuse, by the time I got back here, the new building still wasn't open yet. It was still under construction. There had been a couple of issues with the foundation, more than issues. It basically, when they started doing construction, I don't know if you remember where Daisy Dukes was?
Yes.
Okay. Remember that big parking lot?
Yes.
So that's now Lemongrass Citronelle. But when they were doing the construction on it, they started digging up the parking lot. And when they did, it started to shake the building next door, which is Nick's Tomato Pie. And it started to like cause issues there. So they had to halt everything for like, I don't know, 2 months or something.
Right.
So when I got there, the job that I was supposed to have wasn't available yet. Mm-hmm. So they brought me into Lemongrass and I started managing there. And then while I was managing there, I was watching my friend who was Max, the owner of Lemongrass, his assistant. I was watching her like manage all of this stuff. She was managing Lemongrass. She was managing, he owned apartments. She was managing the construction project. And she was also, I think, 7 months or 8 months pregnant. And she was doing all of this work on her own. And I was just sitting there, just watching for maybe the first week. And I was like, something's going to happen. She's going to go out. she's going to go into, she's so stressed out. She's so like, she's working her tail off. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, if she goes out early or even, you know, on time, there's so much here that is reliant on her that we're all going to be feeling the effect of it. And she's going to feel the effect of it because she's going to feel like she can't step away from the job and enjoy her baby and have that time. So somewhere in the first couple of weeks, I just looked at her and I was like, Ploy, I was like, you need to just share everything with me. Like, tell me what you're doing. Like, I'm going to shadow you now and we're just going to do this together because there's no way, like, that's just too much. It was too much.
Yeah.
So I ended up ultimately taking over the remaining project of Citronelle, getting that like taken care of, finishing out the construction, doing all of the like interior, hiring, just doing, there's so much that goes on when you open a new physical location, all these like itty bitty details
Right.
that you don't know until you're like halfway into the project. It was just making me think about like how we were talking about the podcast earlier before, like all these little details that go into setting things up that you don't realize until you're in it.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's what I ended up coming back to Syracuse for that, opening Citronelle, working there. And then I was the manager there. And I think a month after we opened and I was just managing, it hit me really hard where I was like, I'm not happy. Like, I'm just not happy. I realized at that time where it was like, I've kind of now at this point in my journey have had multiple experiences of being a part of these like startup projects where I realized once that bit of like the hustle and bustle was done,
right,
I just felt like I don't really fit in here anymore. Like I felt like that was really my role, was to just come in and get this thing going and get it set up. So I ended up having a talk with the owner and we decided to part ways. And then what was I doing? And then I was just in Syracuse for a while. And then my brother started talking to me about this idea for the bar. And this was 2000, I think the beginning of like 2019 or the end of 2018 when he was talking to me about it. And just every couple of months we would kind of sit down and chat ideas. And he was like constantly working on it, creating a business plan. I think he worked on his business plan for like 2 years, something like that. And then in like November, December of 2019, we decided that we would kind of go in on it together and he would have me join him at the start of the year to really get it. I would be like his right-hand person to help him get it up and running, to go through all of like the nitty-gritty details and get it operational. So we started doing that beginning of January. We started having like business meetings, sitting down, talking about the business plan, going over it, really critiquing, getting to like the detail of things. And the thing that I really love about my brother's business, about 3 Lives, is that it was from the beginning about community. It was about something much bigger. So it wasn't just about a restaurant and making money. It was about providing an atmosphere, a community for a specific group of individuals who have kind of, I don't want to say fallen to the wayside, but kind of have lacked a space to come together. And I'm talking about like gamers in the gaming community and kind of these people who kind of feel like on the outsides of things, where it's like to be on, they normally like meet their community as online. But that's not, we know that's not enough for people. We need like in real life experience too. So that was our goal from the beginning, to create this space for people to come off of their computers and come in person and have these exchanges and experiences while still connecting to what they love.
Right.
And that was what I really loved about working with him and why I was so adamant about like joining him in that project. And then it just so happened that we had our little friend COVID come and visit.
Our friend COVID.
Yeah, our friend COVID, who just flipped everything on its head.
Yep.
But yeah, that was that was interesting. So we were working on 3 Lives. We had just gotten the lease. We had just gotten into the space, and we were starting construction. It was like mid-February, when we started doing like some demolition on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
We were hoping our goal was to be open by April, which I knew was already going to be a kind of a tight timeline. And then COVID happened in March. Everything came to a complete halt. And for months, we weren't allowed to do anything. We didn't come back into the space until I think the end of May. We were allowed to get back in there and start resuming some of the work. And then everything just kind of picked up from there. It was a wild ride.
Yeah, man, I tell you what, wild it's an understatement because it sounds like a roller coaster, but
yeah.
And it's amazing how, and I mean, 3 Lives is still there today. You know, I had the opportunity to go in and visit 3 Lives, and it's such an eclectic place, you know,
Yeah.
with the vintage video games and all of that. But, you know, it's one of the few local businesses in Syracuse that survived the pandemic and all of the shutdowns.
What was built in the pandemic.
Yeah, you
It
know,
wasn't even
and
that's one of the things too that was really difficult. So like financially, during COVID, there was a lot of grant and funding for businesses that were already established prior to COVID.
mm-hmm.
But if you were a new business, you didn't qualify. So
Oh,
that
wow.
that was so frustrating for us, because we're like, but we're trying to do something. We're trying to create some
Right.
good. We're like giving people something that they really need right now.
Yeah.
And we don't even have any support for it. So, but yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. And you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you get faced with a problem, you pivot and you find a solution. And you get faced with a problem, you pivot and you find a solution. And you know, a lot of businesses were able to do that well during that time, new or otherwise, and some not so well because they didn't survive, like Blue Tusk and some of the other ones.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just a testament to that creative thinking, to relying on past experiences, to having, you know, kind of that meeting of the minds of, you know, how exactly are we going to do this?
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, it's just a testament to you and John and the
Yeah.
crew of what you were able to create. And now he's been even able to expand from there, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What's on your horizon?
So, oh gosh, next for me. So I just moved to Florida.
No, well, you're not local again.
But you know, I'm still like connected. So I actually have started working with my brother again, just in a different capacity, where I'm working with him more on like a consultant base. Consultant, you know, I'm still trying to like figure out consultant, independent contractor, like all of that mumble jumble. And I'm like, do we really have to define it? Like, can we just be like, we're working together and we know what we're doing? And but trying to define it is on my end. But I'm working with him now, helping him to kind of pull some of it. Like, so he has 3 businesses now. He has 3 Lives. He has Fork and Knife Deli. Pork and Knife, sorry.
I was gonna say, I just thought I had it wrong.
No, I had it wrong. Pork and Knife Deli, and then Monkey Brains, which is a ghost kitchen that operates out of 3 Lives, doing well, we can't use the word the Rochester plates. We can't say what it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so I'm working with him on trying to figure out the whole, like, his marketing, social media, all of that, because right now, as an entrepreneur, you know, there are a bajillion things that we're doing all at once. And especially when you start out, everything is on you. You're the one that's doing it. And if you have enough time to breathe and kind of step out of it enough to see like what you're doing and assign it to somebody else who's in your area, that's wonderful. But a lot of times we're just so caught up in the go that we don't have that space to step back and look at what we're doing and
Right.
create a strategy for bringing others in to, offload our plate. So that's what I'm working with my brother on right now, in helping him to figure out, especially in terms of social media marketing, because that's such a massive part of your business and getting out there and getting in front of your community. I'm trying to figure out with him, like, how do we define what's being done and create separate roles for this so that he doesn't have to do it all. So
Good plan.
yeah,
Good
that's
plan.
our big project right now, which is a lot of fun because I love being back in, I mean, I'm not back in the space, but being back in connection and community with Three Lives and the energy there and the creativity that's there. It's amazing. All
Yeah.
the different ideas that are running around. And I think that's what happens when you really find your passion, when you find something that you're excited about. It's just
Yep.
like your brain just starts going over
Yeah.
time.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I'm working on that with him. And that's the area that I'm going into now, is just working to find more small businesses that I can help with strategizing, figuring out plans,
Mm-hmm.
and then just continuing with my coaching and writing a book. That's on my list too.
Good.
Like,
I
yeah,
highly
that's one of the
encourage you.
things. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about, especially since I've been down here, is just kind of like having a space. Because I just moved, 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been able to step out of my space for a little while now and kind of look at everything that I'm doing and what I want to be doing and all of that. And right now, like, the biggest thing is just like writing and starting to share my story and starting to create materials for other people, women, entrepreneurs that are going through these different changes and, maybe in that chaotic storm, and give
Yep.
them some resources to help them through. And one of the things I found, especially with like the personal coaching, is price point is really difficult.
Yes.
So, and it's so hard to, like, for me to survive as a business, you have to set a certain price point. But then I feel like it just like cuts so many people off, and where I'm coming from and what I have to share, I want everybody to have access to it. So that's why I'm like, I think I really need to get back into my writing and just focus on that. So it's like a lower price point where people can still have the access. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my big goal, is to get there so I can just share all. It shouldn't cost us. It's like healthcare. It's like, it shouldn't cost us an arm and a leg to survive.
Yeah, for
You know what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
The basic needs that we all have, the hierarchy of needs, and you're right, it
yeah,
shouldn't cost a fortune to be able to survive.
yeah.
Uh, that's awesome. So, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time, and it's funny
Yeah.
how 40 minutes will fly by, but hey, we could probably sit here and talk forever. So we'll definitely have to do a part two.
Yes, I'm
But
totally down.
I want to make sure people can connect with you. So what's the best way for people to connect with you, either online, through social, or whatever it might be?
So I'm mainly online on Facebook and Instagram. So at Miss Nicole Danielle,
Mm-hmm.
MS Nicole Danielle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or you can visit my website at awanderlostlife.com. And yeah, that's the best way.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Nicole, like I said, we'll definitely have to do a part two. But I appreciate you taking the time this fine early morning to kind of share your experiences, share your local flavor, and how you've supported your brother's business and kind of invented yourself here in Syracuse,
Mhm.
Central New York, and took it to London, took it to Florida, and
Hitting all the
providing,
corners of the world.
hitting all the corners
That's
of
the
the
goal.
world, and setting yourself up for greatness realistically.
Hmm.
So with that, everybody that's watching, we're trying to build a local community through this podcast, have these local flavored conversations. There's a lot more to come, a lot more guests. But once this airs, I'll make sure I schedule part two with Nicole so we can dive deeper into this, and hopefully I don't have technical difficulties at the beginning that starts the recording late. But please like, comment, share. Let us know what you think. Shoot Nicole any questions that you may have. Feel free to reach out to her or I. And with that, until next time, this is episode 4 of CNY Conversations. And everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a great day.
Bye.